Hi, this is PR Frank, and today I'm going to show you some great techniques with Illustrator by tracing this house. I'm going to show you techniques about placing as a template, duplicating, layers, polygons, direct selection, step and repeat, paste remembers layers, and using symbols, all by generating an illustrated version of this house. Something that will end up looking like this. We'll have a layer that is simply a wireframe of the house. This is one artboard, and on the other artboard, we'll have the filled in version of the house. And as you can see, we have layers for each area of the house. So let's get started. First, I want to start with a new file. Letter size is fine, and landscape. And in the name, I'll just type Illustrator House. I'd like to place the image of the house that I will trace. And an important thing to check right before I begin tracing is the box labeled template at the bottom of the place menu. That will allow me to have a transparent version of the house that will allow it to be more easily traced. There we go. And then I begin by examining the house and trying to imagine what the layers are. In Illustrator, you have to build layers upon layers upon layers, as if you were cutting out pieces of paper and laying them down onto a surface, so that your final image ends up being smaller and smaller pieces of paper on top of each other to create the design. So I'm going to start with my first layer just being the house outline. So I'm able to name that by just double clicking it and pressing enter when I'm done with the name. And I'll start with my rectangle tool because it's simply a square house. So I start here at this corner, and I'm going to click and drag the main area of the house, imagining what's behind the tree. Now you'll notice it's filled in white, and I would like to see through that. So here I have my fill color set to white, and right beneath the fill in the stroke, I have a none button. If I click that, now I'm only left with the stroke, and I can see the outline. Now, I also have a bottom part of the house here, which is a different color. So I'll trace that. I also have a cement area, the foundation of the house, which goes to about here. And I just keep layering on the various rectangles to form those shapes. The next thing I need to think about is the roof area. But the roof area is a rather odd shape. It's not quite a rectangle. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a trapezoidal shape. What I can do is I can make another new layer, and I'll just call it roof. And I'll draw, once again, a rectangle in the shape of that roof. Now, in order to really take advantage of this, I can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, an imaginary fourth side, and that's why I have a four-sided shape. There are two types of selection tools in Illustrator. One is called the direct selection tool, and the other one is called the selection tool, and the other is called the direct selection tool. The selection tool is black, and it selects entire objects and moves them around, as you can see. And the other is called the direct selection tool. The direct selection tool will allow me to take individual anchor points and move those. Sometimes when you grab an anchor point, the entire shape still moves with it. To prevent that, you can deselect the shape, come back to it, and select the anchor you wish to move. Now I wish to move this anchor point over to where I imagine the roof meets the upper roof, and then do the same thing symmetrically on the other side. This point needs moved up a little. And I just continue moving those anchor points until I have something satisfactory for my roof. I can continue that for the lower roof. I repeat that, where I'm going to draw a rectangle, get my direct selection tool, and use my anchor points to redirect these anchors so that they are in the shape of the polygon that it then forms the roof. You can do that with even more complicated shapes. If I had a shape, for instance, that had 7 sides to it, I could create a 7-sided polygon and begin to reshape it. The next technique I'd like to show you is how we can deal with something such as the railing here on the front porch. You notice it has a repeated set of rectangles very evenly spaced from one another. If I zoom in on that, I'm doing Command and plus. What I'll do is I'll get my rectangle tool. Before I do that, let's create a new layer just for the railings. I get my rectangle tool and I draw just one of those railings. And then the action I'm going to perform now is with my selection tool. If I'll hold down Alt, you'll notice that a second arrow appears telling me that I'm going to duplicate this shape. So I Alt click and drag the exact distance I want. If I hold down Shift, it'll be perfectly to the right of that. What I've just done is an action where I Alt click drag an object from one location to another, a certain distance. And if I want to repeat that action in Illustrator, I simply hold down Command and press D. This is called step and repeat. And you'll notice that each time I press Command D, it creates another railing that I can use in my drawing. So with those techniques, you should be able to finish creating the house. The next thing that I would do is perhaps the windows, then the frames of the windows, then the pillars, then perhaps the downspout, and any other details that seem to be layered on top of things that are already laying there. So it's a good measure to think through the drawing before you start drawing all the shapes, so you can decide the order in which you want to lay everything out. It can always be changed later by reorganizing the layers, and if you toggle open a layer, you can even move the paths within the layers to get the look or the order that you want. After a while, when I've traced the house, it will look something like this. You see it's very detailed. It has all those slats and windows and door frames and chimneys and awnings and all the things that go into making that house look like that house. Now I'll show you how to get this house to paste onto another artboard. It's kind of tricky because if I select the whole house and I copy it, I'm doing Command C, go to my artboard tool. Here I can, in my options bar, I can click on the new artboard icon. It'll allow me to make an artboard of the exact same size as the currently selected one. If I simply paste onto this new artboard, what happens is all of those layers get copied into just one layer. Let me undo and show you. This house, when it's selected, takes up all of these layers. You can see there's a colored square in almost every one of these layers to represent layers that are separated for this home. And I'd like to keep it that way. So before I paste to another artboard, I need to do something very special in my Layers panel. I need to drop down the options here in the top right-hand corner of my Layers panel and choose Paste Remembers Layers. In this way, if I paste onto this artboard, you'll notice that all of those layers contain these layers of the house. Therefore, not losing the resolution I have within those layers. Once I have that all pasted, I can then begin to color in my home. One of the ways to do it is to sample colors from the original image. For instance, if I choose File, Place, and I get the original image, this time not as a template, and I place it here, let's say, then I can begin selecting parts of the home with my selection tool. This part of the house here is sort of that gray stone color. I can get my eyedropper tool, click on the gray stone color, and it takes that color. And what I want to do is, instead of working from the largest shape to the smallest shape, I really want to work from the smallest shape to the largest shape, because you can see what's going to happen here is I'm going to lose some of those details in the back that I could see before I started filling that in. So let's start with something smaller. I'll get my selection tool. I'll get a small window, eyedropper tool, and I'll go to a window of about the same color and let that fill in. Then I'll go back to my selection tool, click another window, and since I want my windows to be the exact same color, I can use my eyedropper to select that window again, rather than from the original drawing, because I might sample another gray. Now I have two windows of the identical color. Now, Illustrator, as a piece of software, the creators, they know you want to switch back and forth between tools like the selection tool and the eyedropper tool frequently. So they've built in a really nice feature. If I select this selection tool and I click a window, and then I click the eyedropper and I click the color I want, all I have to do to get back to the selection tool again is press the command key. And as I hold the command key, the selection tool appears. As I release the command key, the eyedropper appears. So I can switch easily back and forth between those two tools by just selecting the command key. So now I command click. And if I'm having trouble command clicking, I can zoom right in. I select that window and eyedropper another gray window. And if I, for instance, want to start these railings, I click on one of the railings and I go over and I sample that nice orange. Maybe a different one that's a little lighter. There we go. And I can hold down command and click and eyedropper, command, click, eyedropper. And I can continue that process to color in the rest of the home. Okay. Now back to the home as it's starting to look finished. Before I put in all those grass and trees and things like that, this is what the home ended up looking like. If I want to put some other elements in to make it look more realistic, then I can draw a rectangle like I did down here for the grass and another rectangle for the sky. And I can also use another feature of preset drawings that come in Illustrator called the symbols. Those symbols are in the symbols panel here. It looks like the club from playing cards. So click symbols and you'll notice there are already some trees there. But if you drop down the top right hand corner of the symbols panel, you can go to open symbol library and see lots of other options here. There's nature and there's trees and grass and things like that. Since the trees and grass are already here, I can start to drag and drop some of these elements, resize them as needed. Just drag and drop. Since these trees, I want them in front of the house, I need to make them larger. If I stretch from the top right-hand corner, it's okay, but you see how the trees can get either too fat or too tall. One method that all Adobe software has is shift, click, drag. And what that does is it maintains the proportions of that object so we don't lose the natural looking proportions. And so I continue that process until I have all the foliage I want and all the detail that I want in that home. And hopefully you will have learned some great techniques in this tutorial that you can use towards future projects.